So today the topic I have is managing social hate speech in social media, a very interesting topic here that we have. And wait 1 second. So as we look at social media, I think this has become a very big concern when we are looking in today's age and technology. Hate speech in the online sphere has become a major concern. I mean, everybody uses smartphones. Everyone has access, especially we are looking at Southeast Asia and then moving on to other parts of Asia, especially in Europe and America. And the platforms there are so many. And even as we talk, every day there are new platforms which are coming up. And the hate speech arena actually keeps on expanding. So for today, when I talk about social media, I will basically be looking at three major platforms, which would be Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, because these are the most common ones that we see in Southeast Asia and which we are also probably most familiar with. When we look at the role of social media, I think it's important to see that social media has two things that social media does. One is to host. And the other thing is to disseminate. When we're looking at hosting, we speak about social media platforms providing the space for individuals and even media to make their content available to the public. So this is where we see basically it becomes a platform to host all this. You can basically have whatever information that you have and you don't know what to do, and people just use it as a platform for sharing. And here in this case, social media becomes a dissemination device. So it's a service basically to spread your content, whatever content. So in the initial stages when social media came about, it was there to connect individuals connected with each other, friends. You could be in Malaysia, you're connecting with friends in Southeast Asia, especially those in Europe and America. And over time, the evolution on the role of social media came that, okay, one step ahead was to go ahead sharing news. Today, social media has become a platform to share ideas. And that is where now the thin fine line has come across to what actually is the role of social media, since we are talking on the topic of hate speech. And this actually becomes very critical. And basically now the issue is governments around the world are talking is what exactly should social media be used for, since we are seeing violence being basically spread and carried out and even shared and propagated on social media. Social media companies have been basically now in the last 2 years especially scrutinized, and they have been forced to relook at what their policies are. So first we'll talk about is Facebook. Facebook, they have been saying, look, we do not allow hate speech on our platform because, they have so many arrays of reasons. They do not want to create an environment of intimidation, exclusion. And also Facebook has been used, Facebook Live, when basically real world violence occurs, you suddenly see cameras popping up and everybody is just recording, and even the attackers the perpetrators using Facebook as a platform to propagate their ideas. So Facebook has come under a lot of scrutiny. In Singapore, we have seen former Home Affairs Minister Dharman Shanmugam. He's been saying, look, why can't Facebook do anything about it? So Facebook has had to relook at its policies. So in the last 1 year, from my understanding, having some conversations with Facebook, they've been looking to how to basically relook what their policy and come out with something new, but they're having difficulties. So which is why in the last point on this slide, we have is define attack as violent or dehumanizing speech. So what has been seen where hate speech has been is to look at a large part of their policy on the dehumanization part, because previously they were just looking at hate speech means I hate you, I want to kill you. But basically now it seems that it's something more. And when we are looking at how Facebook detects, so now you have options. You can actually complain, you can lodge a report to Facebook regarding hate speech. So they have, this is the process here, an image to share how actually the process where Facebook takes to basically take down hate speech. But that alone is actually, I believe, is not enough, and it's not good actually, because I've actually tried this in the area of hate speech, and sometimes because they are policy. So the issue here is Facebook is an American company. So it might not, some of its policies, I believe, again, it's my personal opinion, I believe it might not suit us Asian countries, because in America, their laws are different. They do have various amendments and their laws. So it comes to the issue of freedom of speech. What is freedom of speech? And the thin line between hate speech and freedom of speech. That is a problem which many countries in Asia are facing. We have seen in the issue in Myanmar, India. I think in Singapore, we have been very strict that we certainly do not want Facebook to be used as one hate speech. And then of course, the other thing which is very going on today is the issue of fake news. So fake news, we have seen issues of fake news and hate speech coming together, which is a problem as well. But I think Facebook is having difficulties to actually grasp the issue with governments in Southeast Asia, especially. Here we can see hate speech on Facebook. From 2017 to 2019, you can see the amount of hate speech that there had been on Facebook and how they actually, the percentage that has been flagged. And we can see the increased, suddenly the amount actually has, as much as the increase. So both ways, the amount of hate speech acted has basically gone tripled and doubled, and it will probably go even more, because now there is the issue of Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter. We talk about anti-Asian sentiments. We talk about various different, so you can be anti-migrant sentiments as well. So I think there is a big challenge here for Facebook. How is it going to actually cope with this issue of hate speech? And with COVID, even the issue and the situation has worsened, because on one hand, Facebook says we lack manpower. And on the other hand, they are coping with governments saying, look, we're going to ban you if you don't do anything. And thirdly, the users so Facebook has become like an online wrestling ring, whereby the anti-hate speech movement versus the hate speech movement. So these examples are basically fresh examples which I have to share with you all. So in the case, we have seen a lot of Islamophobia. Two Facebook groups. One is Council of Ex-Muslims of Bangladesh. The other one is Should We Ban the Burqa? So we've got this is from India, the anti-Hindu movement. And of course, White Lives Matter is another new group which has been born out of the Black Lives BLM movement in America. So we can see how basically as human beings, we react very fast to what is going on around the world. And we see that Facebook actually cannot do much. So which is why I think there's a lot of call for social movement groups and other groups to come and say, look, we need to say what is the definition of hate speech where social media is concerned. Twitter. When we look at Twitter, they actually are doing much better than Facebook in terms of taking down the material where hate speech is concerned. I have seen that actually they act much faster, because if you have to look at how on Facebook, what we have are groups, private groups, but fortunately Twitter does not allow that. So Twitter in a way is very active and proactive in its own way to actually take down anything that is considered under hate speech, and their algorithms pretty good, I would say. So for example, again, coming to the topic of Myanmar, so Wiratu basically, while on Facebook, I have discovered or rather seen that, some of his pro-Wiratu pages are still existent on Facebook. It is not the case on where Twitter is concerned. So Twitter's algorithms probably are working much better, and they now do have this policy, what they call as, they don't call it hate speech, but they call it hateful conduct. So they're saying that, look, your conduct online. So, we have what we see online and offline actually has quite a bit of a connection. So, what probably is said online is being translated into online content. So the online and offline interaction, human interaction is actually very important for us to also see, because when we are doing background studies and we are looking at what actually is going on, why is this individual being, we could say, radicalized, or why does he hate this person, this gender, this race, this religion? It's always important to see what is actually going on offline, rather than coming to say, look, I'm just going to come to a conclusion that this individual is a racist, he or she promotes violence, and he or she promotes hate speech. I think it's very important for us to see what actually is going on offline and offline. There will be a connection. Hate speech on Twitter. Dr. L spoke about, and this anti-Chinese sentiments here we have got at the bottom here. Hey, Chink, go back to your country. So you can see this is all during this COVID period. Then we see about Islamophobia is probably the biggest problem where Southeast Asia is concerned, because we see this whole issue where in Thailand, whether in Myanmar, we have got this issue of the Buddhists versus the Muslims. I think in Malaysia, in Singapore, we have been able to contain this sort of thing much better because of our how our society is. So we have got Chinese, Indians, and Malays. So it's a historical thing. So as Dr. L also said, look, we have to look what actually is the historical context to hate speech in the country. In Indonesia, they are having a lot of problems grappling this Sunni Shia problem, because to them is the Shia, whatever the Sunnis say is correct. And I think I certainly agree with Dr. L's, the thing where he spoke about, the political radicalization. So politicians actually play a very important role, especially we are seeing in the example of Myanmar, how they're propagating the anti-Rohingya propaganda, whether it's been online, offline. In Indonesia, we see religious figures playing the game of politics. In India, it has become very prevalent, looking at the BJP government spreading through religion, talking about the Hindutva. So I think that is and it can become a problem for us in Southeast Asia, because we have to understand we have a very big migrant community coming here to work. So whether they are coming from South India, North India, again, so hate speech again goes to, if we can't say that, look, all people, only those people who are in the West or they are whites are actually propagating hate speech. We have got many of our own Asian friends, brothers or sisters, actually propagating this sort of hate speech. And hate speech, it also borns out of exclusivism. YouTube is interesting, is that they are very fast also in removing the hate speech content. As we can see, look, I'm just sharing with you all what are the areas which they have put as the markers to contribute and to identify individuals, what is considered hate speech, how do they remove their content. But again, there are a lot of difficulties in doing this, because when people put on their material online, once they realize that, look, if I put under a certain identity, it gets removed, they're using other identities or in other languages which YouTube might not be familiar with. So by the time YouTube actually removes the content, it is probably a few hours, a few days. And then the content keeps getting reshared over and over again. So that becomes a challenge, that how do we actually basically stop this content from being online. And you also see that, look, they have done a lot. YouTube is doing a lot to actually to take off hate speech. But the issue then becomes I think the issue that all social media companies are facing today is in their country of operations, the law of that country. So for example, in Singapore, we always raise is that the question, the problem we have with these social media companies is that we have to keep stressing to them is, we are not America. You are not operating in a Western environment where there is so much of freedom of speech. So it is the onus of the social media companies to actually understand the cultural and religious norms of the country with which the content goes out to. Of course, it becomes a very thin line, because they turn around and would tell us that, look, the laws being applied to us are American laws. So I think that is where the challenge lies today. Looking at the implication and challenges, are actually much more fearful that, look, the danger of hate speech in Southeast Asia, and as I said, we are multiracial, multi-religious, and multilingual societies. How does hate speech grow? And hate speech we are going to see it grow, because as COVID ends and new ideas form, people are going to start blaming, like in Europe, for example, they are saying that there is this doctors are saying that South Asian men are actually more prone to death where COVID is concerned. So the issue is, again, then the issue in Europe is why, being a white is better than being an Asian. So we see that sort of form of the the speech being spread about. The challenge for governments is huge today. How do we, so in Malaysia, we have seen Singapore also, Indonesia is having a problem because we see how the government, actually the new government today has got a lot of religious figures who are associated with groups which are said to be racially intolerant, radical. Myanmar is quite obvious. In Thailand also, they're having problems. How do we solve the problem in South? In the Philippines also, even though they're in the Philippines, they're not so open that as to what is the issue in the southern Philippines. And, to them, it's a far problem. And then if we go back to outside of Southeast Asia, the issue, of course, would be in India, because there is a big Hindu movement, which is basically sowing a lot of discord. And a lot of these individuals associated with these movements, especially in India, have actually moved into Southeast Asia. So we see them in Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand. And of course, now the issue of the Black Lives Matter and, like I said, White Lives Matter and far-right extremism is actually on the rise, as everybody is just looking at Islamic terrorism as a problem. And the downside of it actually has become is that the rise of the white supremacists, an issue which everybody said had died down with Ku Klux Klan finishing off in the US, and that, the issue of whites is not a problem today. But we see how Europe, especially Germany, being taken, and the ideas of Hitler coming back, and the ideas of Hitler as these far-right groups in Holland, in Germany said that, look, his ideas are relevant as ever. So the issue is that hate speech is basically the new weapon in cyberspace, and is going to unravel the harmony in society. How are we going to challenge this? Governments have been putting law. For example, in Singapore, we do have the Sedition Act. And now the Singapore government has been working for the last 1 year to see how hate speech online can actually lead to you being sentenced. So it becomes a jail sentence and a fine as well. And then there would be the law would basically be taking over such cases. So I think the challenge now is to have for more governments and to embrace the fact that firstly, hate speech is an issue. We need to address the problem and how actually we do have various laws to tackle this online, because previously it was just an issue of offline. So the challenge is how do we actually go about tackling this problem online and embracing it. And as we said, like I said, Malaysia, in the case of Malaysia, it's also a big melting pot. We see so many nationalities gathering in Malaysia, whether they're using it as a transit point, whether they're using it to come to work, study. It becomes a problem. How do I accept everybody? Of course, there will be problems. Even in Singapore, we do have a lot of problems now with COVID. Everybody is saying that, look, all the construction workers are an issue where Singapore is concerned. Look at the numbers of COVID casualties where they're there. So I think the problem is that how do we actually contain this problem? And the government is actually addressing it by saying, look, okay, let's all come together. Different communities have to come together and have a discussion. You need conversations, and we just can't say that we are going to solve this problem later on. And social media companies are being forced, whether they like it or not, they have to actually have a conversation with various stakeholders and with society and bring this problem to the ground to say, look, yes, it is a problem. Our platforms are being abused, and we actually want to do something to ensure that we continue to exist, because the companies know that if they allow their platforms to be used as a platform for hate speech, the governments of the day would actually come after them in whatever form they would. Like, for example, we see now TikTok is out of India, and TikTok has the largest number of users in India. So if one country says, I want to ban Facebook because it's causing religious problems in my country, I think if Singapore does it, other countries would also say, look, we need you out because you're basically causing problems for social fabric and social harmony and stability and nation building in my country. So with that, thank you very much. I end my presentation here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jasminder, for a very interesting presentation.